Hi, my name is Bob Hiss. I'm your Milton Town Moderator, and welcome to our show where we preview with the Chair of the Warrant Committee the upcoming annual town meeting. So I'm joined here today by Mr. David Humphreys.
Good evening.
Who's this year's Chair of the Warrant Committee. In case you were unaware, the annual town meeting is going to be held this coming Monday, which is May 1. We're going to be again back at the high school in the Milton High School auditorium. We will start at 7:30 p.m. promptly. If members would try to get there a little bit early, because we will be running electronic voting on the full town meeting. So we ran a trial run back in our winter town meeting. That went successfully. We've now procured the technology. And so we need to hand out the electronic voting devices to all the town meeting members. So as part of your registration process, you'll check in, you'll get a clicker. And since we'll probably get 250, 260 people showing up, getting there a few minutes early to help us get the clickers out would be great. So what I've done with prior warrant committee chairs is we go through all the articles in the warrant and ask for thoughts and comments that reflect what the warrant committee considered and the background to their recommendations. I think we've got a nicely done document here and looking forward to our discussion. So with that, Mr. Humphreys, Chair, we start on page 13. A few perfunctory ones. Article 1. Now, by the way, I normally put this in the consent agenda. And by the way, if you're unfamiliar, in the past, a few years ago, we adopted something called a consent agenda, where I take articles which I hope will be relatively uncontroversial, meaning they've received overwhelming support in the past and zeroed a few questions. And I gather them all up into one motion. And then if anyone wants to pull out one of the articles, I need 5 members to stand up. We pull an article out. But everything that's left, and in the past we've had 15 to 20 articles remain in the consent agenda, we vote on those as a group, and it makes the meeting go much faster. And then we can just then spend our time asking questions, hearing presentations on the articles that are of particular interest to the members that night. So normally Article 1 would be in that consent agenda, but I've had a request from the Select Board for a presentation by the Equity and Justice for All Committee. They put in this request in some prior town meetings, but this article specifically is the place where we hear from town officers and departments and committees. So they'll be giving a presentation during Article 1. There's nothing particularly controversial about it. We just note that the town meeting members have seen and accept the report of the town. With that, we'll go to Article 2. Dave, fairly straightforward. It's always there. This will be in the consent agenda, but anything controversial about that?
I would not say that there's anything controversial. I think it is important to note that while these are the types of things that we would vote to approve every year and would be in the consent agenda, if they weren't important, they wouldn't be in the warrant. Is that because it does involve the collection of taxes, which is money. Mm-hmm. All monies must be voted upon by town meeting. We would recommend that the town vote yes. I just want to make that comment, that even though some of these things are very commonplace to be bundled together and voted, it's not because they're not important. Every single article in the warrant is as important as every other one.
Well said. So Article 3, compensating balance agreements. Maybe just quick description. What's a compensating balance agreement?
So I am not an accountant, but it's my understanding is that there's certain types of adjustments that have to be made to certain accounts involving payments that the town makes. Okay. And that because it involves an expenditure, even though one could say it's a routine accounting type of adjustment that's made, it nevertheless needs to be approved by town meeting because it does involve expenditure.
Very good. So the town meeting is overseeing the town treasurer to some degree.
Yes.
in this article. Okay. Article 4, capital items. So they're different than the operating expenses, and we've got a pretty good list here. Almost $6 million, $5.7 million. What stood out for you amongst the discussion this year on capital?
Well, with regards to the warrant committee's deliberation on this, is that we did not get too into the weeds, if you will, with regards to the decisions with regards to what was on this list, what was not on this list, because we would show great deference to the considerations of the capital projects committee. Mm-hmm. That puts tremendous thought into this. They are looking at the town's needs at least 5 years out. So by the time something ends up on our warrant for expenditure in the next fiscal year, it's probably been on that list for quite some time. So we are happy to approve the requests for these capital expenditures. If you just look at it, you can see that these are things that the townspeople will see these being used every day. There's a lot of trucks.
Building upgrades, school technology, material things that'll benefit the town.
Right, it'll benefit the town on a daily basis.
And since these are bonded, they won't be directly hit the operating budget of the town, but we'll borrow money and then pay this off over a certain period of time. So it'll be spread out over a number of years.
Yes.
All right, very good. Article 5 is the town audit. If I see that right? Yes, municipal audit.
Right. So these are recommendations that we have to make basically on a yearly basis. It's a cost. And we're recommending that we pay the cost that would be due for fiscal year 24.
Looks like it went down in 23, but it went up because of an item that has to be added to the audit every couple of years.
Every couple of years. So
we'll kind of see it seesaw over time.
Yes.
From year to year.
Yes.
All right, very good. Next we have Article 6. This is set-asides for department budgets, collective bargaining. This one is there every single year. Anything in particular of note this year?
I think that this year was a little bit bigger than we normally would have because there were some collective bargaining agreements that were still underway.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, I believe in the warrant here, it says it expired in June of 22. So my recollection is that this is a little bit bigger than we normally see, but because that is the result of this ongoing negotiation.
All right, very good. Article 7, employee benefits, one of the larger line items in the town, and you've got some substantive comments in here. What did you learn about employee benefits this year?
I don't think that we saw that there was much due. It's that it's a big number based upon the obligations that the town has made, and this is our recommendation.
Yeah, if I look in some prior years, we've seen very large increases in insurance and retirement, but this looks like it's about 800 grand on the 21 million, which is more modest than we've seen in other years, particularly in a high inflation environment. So that seems like fairly good news then for the taxpayers.
Yes.
Okay. Article 8 is on unemployment, a small number, but an important one.
Yes.
Any controversy over unemployment? No, this one was relatively straightforward.
Straightforward.
All right. Very good. Article 9 is where the Personnel Board goes through and lists all the different, let's call it the job descriptions and levels of the town. So it goes on a number of pages from 17 out to 21. But then it comes up with some recommendations of some wage adjustments by department, summarizing all that. Again, not a huge number by historical standards.
That's correct.
So how do they come up with these numbers? This is submitted by the select board, but do you work with the town administrator to work these up?
Yes, well, the wage adjustments would be in the overall town budgets. Every committee, every department puts forward their budget, and then in this article, there are some of these wage adjustments that need to be made effective July 1, 2023. And so this 95,000 as part of this article, that is the total of those adjustments throughout the entire budget.
Got it. These are just to kind of true up employee compensation then department by department.
Yes.
It looks like. Okay. Very good. I know we're moving along quickly, but we try to get this done in an hour with 46 articles, I think. So Article 10, public safety, and it includes a number of things: inspection, fire, emergency, police, and you've got some good comments. What did you learn from our public safety officials this year?
I think that public safety, as we're getting into the warrant, is the first of the major department budgets that we have. And what we're seeing here in our comment is that there's an allocation from free cash. And the recommendation was that we vote this budget And the purpose here of the $78,364 in free cash would be for the hiring of 2 police officers. I think it's important to note, and there's some discussion of this in the report of the warrant committee for the 2023 annual town meeting that begins on page 11 of the warrant, is that this budget benefits greatly from approximately $970,000 in free cash that's being used for needs-based departmental budget requests.
Close to $1 million.
It's
right?
close to $1 million,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of free cash. It is more than we normally see. Certainly more than we could ever hope for, and more than we will probably see again anytime soon. And I'm raising this point now in the public safety because it's the first time that we see in the warrant the use of this free cash money. And the warrant committee deliberated greatly with regards to the use of this free cash in the budget, especially for positions and recurring budgetary items. And in approving the overall budget, and by saying approving the overall budget, is that this budget was presented to us as through a process by which the town administrator, the select board, and also, I think to a large degree, the school committee got together, and there was a lot of negotiation and discussion among them that presented to us, the warrant committee, this budget using almost $1 million of free cash. And in light of there having been a lot of discussion in the last budget cycle of the need for a Proposition 2.5 override that could have happened with regards to this budget, this FY24 budget, it was seen, a compromise isn't the best word, but it's like a compromise, is that the use of the free cash could obviate the need to pursue a Proposition 2.5 override going into this town meeting for 24. And the warrant committee generally agreed with the budget and with the recommendations that were presented to us through this process. And so therefore, Mr. Hess, this $78,000 here for 2 police officers, specifically with a focus on community service and traffic enforcement, is the first time in the budget that you're going to see the use of the free cash.
Understood. So the free cash, as I understand it, is in the FY23 budget, the town is either forecasting we're going to spend less or we're going to take more revenue in than was forecasted. So it's a budget surplus, so to speak. And I guess the debate is, do you bank that for a rainy day, or do you spend that on the next fiscal year? But if you do that, and that kind of gets baked into the cake, if you will, in the following year, you're then left with, how do I fund those 2 police officers when I'm coming into FY25?
Correct.
So that's the debate you went through.
Correct.
Okay.
And some money did go into the reserve fund.
Right.
So it wasn't like all of the free cash was spent in the operating budget, but there was a balance. And so, again, this is the first place you see the use of the free cash for 2 police officers.
I think cities and towns all across the country are looking at this, particularly with the ARPA funds that have come in during COVID. And towns are debating, do we spend this money? Do we turn it back? Do we bake it in permanently? Do we, et cetera? So we're in good company, as you might.
Indeed.
Say. Okay. But overall, still a modest increase, only about $100,000 in public safety. So those departments are certainly living within that Prop 2.5 limit. Article 11 is general government. So this would be everything you might see at town hall, it seems. Accounting, insurance, IT, select board, et cetera. So there's about a dozen different items. And again, a fairly modest increase from 4.9 to 4.9.5, so less than $100,000 increase. But again, free cash is here as well. Yes, it is, another $128,000.
Right.
Anything of particular note
There's no
this?
controversy here.
Okay. In agreement between town administrator, the select board, and the warrant committee. Okay?
Yes.
Very good. 12 is, let's see, recommending that the bylaws. So we've had a bylaw review committee out there for a number of years, and I know they've been going through a codification, which is a renumbering process. But what did you learn during Article 12? And I think there's a couple others, maybe 13 and 14 here.
Right. So this is what we learned is that Article 12 and 13 to vote to renumber and recaption zoning bylaws, that's 13, and general bylaws, which is 12. It's a process that's been ongoing for some time, is that it is to address a situation where it looks like the actual bylaws of the town, which are antiquated is probably a good word, the way that they are maintained and the way that we access them it is antiquated, and that these are articles to address that and to begin to make them more accessible and in a more modern way.
So it looks like the committee wanted to do two things. One, get the numbering system right, because I think the last codification of the bylaws was something like 2007. And there have been all these inserts and changes in rules and zoning bylaws, and the cross-references may be wrong. So job one is to get all the cross-references right, the table of contents and the indices and all that, but leave the content alone. And these are just the codification ones of the general bylaws in 12 and the zoning in 13, but no changes into the language, so to speak. Okay. So hopefully that's relatively straightforward, but understood. And I guess we'll get to the bylaw committee, but they do want to come back to the content later on, and so future town meetings will address that. Okay, so that's 12 and 13. And 14 looks like it's now extending the bylaw review committee, I guess, to go after that content then.
Right, it's a big job. So they're asking for additional time of 2 years, and also for some money. In order to be able to hire administrative support, because there's just a lot of clerical in going through all of this and helping to run the committee. So they're asking for additional time and budget in order to help out with the administrative work.
Mr. Mullen, who's the chair, comments that there are phrases in the bylaws like we're not allowed to throw our coal ash out on the street, and I'm happy to say that his household has been in full compliance with that our entire 25 years here. But other things like, I thought it would be uncontroversial, riding horses through the Milton Cemetery. And then I think I watched one of your warrant committee meetings and said, well, people do ride the horses through town, and maybe they shouldn't ride their horses. So I think word by word, they're going to go through the bylaws and think this stuff through. So God bless them. 15, we're back to some budget items. So this is on boards and committees, relatively small ones, but this looks like just the operating expenses of a long list of our paid and volunteer committees. Is that generally right? Okay. Anything controversial about those this year for the members?
We found no controversy.
Very good. And relatively small, actually a decrease overall from 23 to 24 in the total expenditure. Okay. Very good. 16, we're into the Community Preservation Act, which this is the first time this will have come before the Milton Town Meeting after having been passed a few years ago. So what did you learn in this process here?
Right, this is really exciting. That there's the Community Preservation Act, which is a fund that's generated for the town out of fees with regards to with regards to we get them from the registry. It's an expense that it's funds that are generated when there's the conveyance of property.
Yeah, I think there's also a 1% surcharge on our tax, and then there's some matching funds, so to speak, that come from this registry fee.
Right. And so, it adds up. And so then we have the Community Preservation Act, the committee, the project funding, they make these recommendations, and there's some rules that they have to play by, that they're looking for community housing, historic preservation, open space and recreation, and they make their recommendations for where they think some of this money should be spent. And it's exciting that we have the ability to do this. And we here in the chart on Article 17, is a description of the work that they want to do.
So it looks like you accepted the recommendations of this committee without any changes of a quick scan. They recommended 1.66 in total funding and looks like 11 projects, and you recommended the same.
Of
So,
course.
very good.
How can you say no to pickleball?
Apparently
You
it's
better
irresistible.
not.
You better not suffer the wrath of the pickleballers.
Right.
Let's avoid that. All right, very good. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a substantive discussion on that and explanation to all the members. And it looks like a lot of things that we'll see coming online over the next few years. Okay, Article 18, Public Works. This one up a little bit more than some others, but again, not a giant amount. Anything noteworthy in Public Works?
They're miracle workers. It's amazing what they can do with their budget.
So this would not be, for example, water and sewer and stormwater, but this is the operation of the town's team that does this. And I know roads are separate as well, I think, in a different article, right?
Right.
Okay, very good. You do have some pretty substantive comments to describe each individual one. I think that'll be helpful for the members to kind of line item by line item understand what's going on.
Yes.
Very good. Article 19, we're into the first of the three enterprises. So we have the water, and then we go into the sewer, and then the stormwater. What's the story behind these this year?
These are expenditures that we see every year, and they are important. And they're about the same year over year, depending upon the requirements that the town has. So we voted to recommend the requested $7,620,399 for the Water Enterprise Fund.
So you approve that as submitted by the Select Board.
Yes.
And it looks like your comments point out that if you look in the water enterprise costs, the MWRA assessment we would pay to that entity is going to be the largest portion
Right.
of the total 7.6 million. And of course, the revenue all comes from primarily the fees we pay for consumption of water.
Right.
Okay, and those have to balance out, and it looks like they do. All right, very good. Sewer enterprise is the opposite end of the spectrum, so to speak. Did you do the same here, except as proposed, both the revenues and the costs from the Select Board?
Yes.
Okay. And again, another large MWRA assessment. So both on the pipes that deliver us the clean water and the pipes that take away the dirty water, that's really looks like 2/3 of the budget
Yes.
goes to carrying water to and from the town, and maybe 1/3 inside the town, so to speak, if I'm stating it correctly.
Yes.
Okay. And then 21 is stormwater, and stormwaters are different than sewer. As I recall from prior conversations, sewer is what comes out of the homes and the buildings, and stormwater is what we collect on the streets.
Yep.
How about, did this one also relatively flat versus last year? Did this also be accepted as proposed by the Select Board?
It's accepted as proposed. I mean, these fees, they are what they are. There's not a lot of negotiation or wiggle room with regards to them. So,
And is this, the revenue, is this what comes from the stormwater assessment we see in our bills?
Yes.
Then, got it, all right. So the water and the sewer are paid as per consumption, and then we all have a small amount. But interesting, the stormwater is also distributed across the entire population of the town, not just the home. So even the tax-exempt organizations help with our stormwater, per, I think, a prior town meeting article a few years ago. All right. Next, we're into maintaining and improving the ways, which really means the roads. What was the story on roads this year?
well, they asked for $626,278 for the roads. That we can accept grants in that amount. Bear with me.
Looks like we're authorizing the appropriation on the assumption that we're going to get these reimbursements of the same amount by
Right,
the
so
state.
we pay it out, but then we get, with regards to this article, it looks like it's a 100% reimbursement.
So it's a wash through the budget, so to speak.
Right.
based on state reimbursement.
Based upon, so this one is that we authorize the expenditure, but then, we get the reimbursement. So that we voted to approve that. And I think we see this is another one of these articles in this neighborhood here that we see these every year.
Yeah, the Chapter 90 funds, I think, is the state law that refers to this reimbursement of the ways.
Right.
Article 23, though, is about the water system, which looks like we will have a borrowing item, so that'll be subject to a 2/3 vote. So this is going after both water and,
Right.
Is it water and sewer or just water? It looks like it's just water, as I see in
Right.
Article 23.
Right. And the difference here is that this one is that we can borrow this money on a 0% loan.
That's pretty good this day and age.
Right. So it's a program that we can take advantage of. We are recommending that we take advantage of it. This one is a 0% loan.
Okay. And then on 24, it is stormwater, but appears to not be sewer. Is that correct? And kind of similar? Also would allow our borrowing?
Right.
Borrowing?
Right. So that's stormwater. And this one is to borrow
About $350,000, it looks
Yes.
like. Right.
and debt service here would be reflected in the town's stormwater enterprise fund budget. So we are going to borrow that money, and then the debt that we would have to repay would come from the stormwater enterprise fund budget.
So next year in our FY25 budget, that debt service will have gone up by a prorated amount here, spread over a few years.
Right.
Understood. Got it. Okay, that's clear. 25 is on the Board of Health. Up a fair amount this year.
Right.
What did the Board of Health ask for?
So I think one of the big things that happened here was that the Board of Health had employed a full-time community health social worker with the ARPA funding, the COVID money. But it looks like that, that money is drying up.
Okay.
And so the Personnel Board did approve that position, and they would like to keep that position going forward. So, once the ARPA money is no longer there, then that position will need to be funded from the town budget.
But it looks like the town is also anticipating something from the opioid settlement to the tune of $75,000, which I guess explains the perhaps roughly that bump going up by about that amount.
Right.
Okay. Very good. 26, the library, almost flat. Any commentary or discussion on the library? Was this accepted as submitted?
It was. It's important. It didn't go up as much as I thought it was going to, because there is a new part-time library assistant. I know that, so they were able to get a new part-time library assistant, and there is $30,000 use of the free cash, in large part for that part-time library assistant.
Understood. Article 27, to sell the former Kidder Branch Library, but no recommendation. That's an unusual thing. What's the background of that recommendation?
Right. So there was no when the warrant committee met to go over the warrant and the articles that we had, the negotiations with regards to the Kidder Branch Library had not been concluded, and it was not ready for us.
And the Kidder Branch is the one that is on Blue Hill Parkway, I think, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It's but they have since had come to an agreement, the town, to sell the Kidder Branch Library to the Discovery School.
They've been leasing it or renting it for a number of years now.
That's
right?
correct,
Okay.
right. And so the warrant committee is going to actually be meeting tonight to discuss this, and I expect that we will have a recommendation with regards to whether or not the town should authorize that sale when we go into town meeting.
So when you do, what we'll do is I'll make sure that gets distributed by the clerk out to the members, including those that'll be elected tomorrow, the 25th. We'll also post it on the town website under the town meeting section, and we'll have handouts for the members on Monday night or whichever night we get to that article. So we call it a green sheet, so it'll be literally on green sheet of paper. Okay, Article 28, the cemetery. Again, relatively modest increase, fairly flat. Anything controversial of note of the cemetery?
No controversy, no.
Okay. Parks and Recs, again, fairly flat. Was this also accepted as submitted by the Parks, the Board of Commissioners of the Parks?
Yes.
Okay. Article 30, the schools. What's up with the school? It looks like it's a pretty good sized number, and I know there was a lot of debate. What was the discussion about this year?
I think that the discussion this year, it focused, I think, on free cash. Is that, as a general statement, all the departments, the starting point is level funding. Mm-hmm. And then we go from there. And then there are what they call here need-based. Back when I used to be an employee of the Department of Defense, we called it supplemental.
Okay.
Need-based supplemental. And more. So then free cash. It's just under this it's almost something like $4 million. Mm-hmm. And so it was just we started with the school budget when we looked at the overall town budget, the school budget, because it is the biggest department. It is the biggest single line item in the budget. We started with that. And there was just a lot of conversation there, mainly around the conversation was a lot about funding, mm-hmm. recurring obligations. So what we do see throughout the budget is most of the free cash is being used for people. Mm-hmm. You know, these are the people in your neighborhood. The firefighter, the teacher, the special education teacher, technology staff. So that was the discussion. We see with regards to schools, it's $500,700 in free cash for recurring positions.
It's about half of that 950 and change you mentioned of the total used. Okay.
Right. And then if you take it, it says it would trigger another $123,627 in benefits.
Which is back in a previous article we covered. Okay.
Right. So when we talk about the use of the free cash for the positions and the benefits, and so that was our big conversation, and this is a debate, like you said before. You know, these are the conversations that every town is having. You know, at what level do you put it into reserve? Do you put it into capital expenditure? Do you put it into things? Mm-hmm. At the end, the warrant committee voted to go with their recommendation. I think I'm just going to read. I think this sums it up. The recommendation is made in the light of the warrant committee's assessment that the request was made as a result of a very thorough budget process through which the town administrator, the select board, and the school department worked together to create a consensus budget that would avoid a budget override for fiscal year 24. The compromise represented by the consensus budget that could avoid an override in fiscal year 24 was a factor behind the recommendation. We felt it was necessary to address growing needs in the school.
And it sounds like you had the whole town leadership coming together around that same consensus when they presented to you.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Now, Article 31, this could be a doozy. This is the so-called land swap. But you have a no recommendation, so perhaps you could shed some light on how the committee deliberated and got to their recommendation.
Right. We have a fairly detailed comment with regards to this. To sum up, the warrant committee did vote no with regards to the land swap. The comment starts by discussing what is a land swap? What does this mean? Is that there is land that's conservation land in the town. That was not always so. Is that there was land, it's generally called the Lamb Sisters property, that was put into conservation back in 1978. Our town meeting was involved in that. There was a warrant Article 7 in the 1978 town meeting whereby the town voted to take certain lands and put it into conservation. Under the Constitution of Massachusetts, conservation land, it generally is to remain conservation land. And if you want to do something else with that, there's a process which you have to follow. And that's what we're calling the swap. And what the swap is the swap is where you take conservation land and you exchange other lands. You make that are you come up with other lands, you make those the conservation land, and you create new conservation land, you swap it out. Now, there's a very detailed process that you have to follow under this, what's called Article 97, the Article 97 amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution, which lays out the procedure for doing this. And so we discussed this procedure. Is that what are the considerations that we would have when we talk about taking conservation land in this so-called swap? So it's permissible to do so. However, there's a very detailed process. And there were a series of considerations that the warrant committee, there was a series of concerns that the warrant committee had with regards to this land swap as we looked at the swap. And at the end of our deliberations, the warrant committee's concerns were just not put to rest. There's a series of showings that have to be made. And it was our concern that some important showings just simply had not been made. For instance, is that as part of the process that they use in the town, you have to, among other things, show that all options to avoid the disposition had been explored and no feasible and substantially equivalent circumstances existed. You know, and so that's where we get to where the discussion of the school was germane. Because according to Article 97, the way it's set up is it almost starts off at no. It just starts off that this is conservation land, and if you are going to take this out of conservation land, there's serious important showings that you have to show. One is basically that you've looked at all alternatives, you don't have any. Is that with regards to that, the warrant committee was just not satisfied that there really were no other alternatives. There's another one, that the swapped land be of equal or greater value to either fair market value or to the value and use of the proposed use. So Fair market value seems easy sometimes. You if you have a buildable lot, it's pretty easy to ascertain how much this buildable lot would be. One could imagine the lot on Guile Road could be very valuable.
You can't swap gold for lead, so to speak, right? Like value, I guess.
Yeah, but it's also of proposed use because now we're concerned about our carbon footprint, and there are certain lands that you might not be able to build on, but could be a carbon swamp. Or a carbon sink, if you will, is that maybe you have a swamp that can hold, that can act as a carbon sink, or that is an important habitat for wildlife. So there are ways that you can value, non-buildable areas, and that can be shown to have a particular value. But a concern that we had on the warrant committee that there've been zero done on that. That certain boards vote unanimously to support it. That would include the Conservation Commission here in Milton, which does not unanimously support this, and that the land swap is not contrary to the express wishes of the persons who donated or sold the parcel. It was the position of the warrant committee that it was clear to us that the Lamb sisters, and I'm just going to read from our warrant comment, that the Lamb sisters through their deed and as reflected in the record of town meeting, it's Milton town meeting, clearly intended for the property to be held in conservation, and that it was clearly the intent of the town to hold it so. On this issue, the warrant committee recommits itself to the pledge that the town once made to protect, preserve, and enhance the land property, and that the town should make all effort to preserve and honor the trust, intent, and promises made to those people who have donated or transferred land or property to the town in one way or another. So that means that the warrant committee, at the end of the day, was voting no with regards to that, not just to honor the commitment that the town has made to the Lamb sisters, but to any commitment that the town has made to anyone.
So if I summarize, all the examples you just gave were process concerns with the swap rather than intent of the swap. Did I capture that sense? Right.
Well, I think that so the issue here, the article is, should we do a land swap? So we focused on the land swap. It was our opinion here and our recommendation that the land swap itself, when we applied the process, when we applied this swap to the process of Article 97 as we understand it, that a good case had not been made. With regards to the school or no school, that was germane with regards to the land swap as to the issue of whether there were alternatives. Now, there was a vigorous discussion at the warrant committee with regards to the land swap, which basically boiled down to, and I'm taking my license, this is my way of characterizing it, of I get all that, but we need a school. So that was in play. So while I think at the end, what prevailed in the warrant committee's opinion in our deliberation was the application of the Article 97 in land swap process to the question of whether the land that they sought to take out of conservation and the process by which they would do it would be to satisfy the statutory scheme presented to us by the legislature, Article 97 in our Constitution. And the warrant committee was not satisfied that it had been shown that the swap as proposed, we were not satisfied that it had met the requirements.
I see.
And so we voted no.
Okay, understood. By the way, what do you do for a living, Mr. Humphries?
I am a criminal defense attorney.
You're an attorney.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Okay. Thank you for that on 31. And I know I'm going to be asking you to explain the no recommendation since it is unusual at town meeting. So thank you for preparing your thoughts in advance. As we get to 32, this is the one referred to typically as the eminent domain that's kind of paired with the swap. But this one, you came out with a favorable recommendation. But what's the story here?
Right. So this was there used to be this thing called American pragmatism. Is that
It's back? Is that what you're telling me? It's like,
so we had originally voted, because we had voted no on the land swap, we had originally voted no recommendation with regards to eminent domain because we thought that it didn't follow to have a recommendation if we were voting no. Because what Article 32 is saying is that can we authorize the select board to pursue eminent domain to get the property if the town votes in favor of the land swap? And someone just brought up, what if the town, at town meeting, it's town meeting who decides whether we do the swap or not, not the warrant committee. And so if the town meeting votes in favor of the swap, then what? The warrant committee is required to give to the town a recommendation with regards to the article. And so then no recommendation from the warrant committee is not going to cut it. And then in light of the fact that anytime we talk about the land swap, our meetings, started running 4 hours, what we didn't want to have to do is to take a 4-hour break in the middle of the town meeting to go off into our little room and hash all of this out while everyone's waiting for us.
okay.
So what we did is we just decided to vote a what if. And so what our recommendation here is that if the town does vote pursuant to 31 to go forward with to land swap, that we would authorize the town to pursue eminent domain should they feel that that would put them in the best legal position possible. Because we anticipate that if the town does go forward with the land swap, that there will be legal challenges. There will be legal challenges. The town, we have received communications from lawyers representing abutters that if it doesn't constitute legal notice of their intent to sue, it's notice of their intent to sue. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted the town to be in the best legal, if we went forward, we wanted the town to be in the best legal position that they possibly could be going forward. And therefore, it was our recommendation that if the town wanted to do eminent domain, that they should be empowered to do so if that was what was going to put the town in the best legal position.
Understood. So we'll be in an interesting position because the way we operate at town meeting is the recommendation of the warrant committee is the first motion on the floor, it's the main motion. So if Article 31 passes, then your recommendation for 32 would be read as the main motion, would go forward. If Article 31 fails, then this recommendation seems to be moot. And I'd seek either, you might consider with your warrant committee if you have a different recommendation at that point, since you've got a conditional if in here, or we could accept a recommendation from the floor, and I could then go to the warrant committee and they decide, what do you want to do with that recommendation? So I'll work that out with town council in advance, and members can make votes from the floor, but perhaps you'd consider that in the warrant committee. What would your position be on then a no vote on 32?
Right, thank you.
Okay, that will be interesting. Article 33, school building committee. This is the owner's project manager. A typical task we have, I know we have one that's been hired by the fire station building committee to help us oversee that project. Again, with this one, are you recommending any expenditure? Looks like it is.
Right, is that the school building committee, whether the land swap goes forward and the project at Guile Road goes forward or not, are going to need money to proceed, either to build that school or to look into alternatives. And so their request was for $275,000, and we voted to recommend to the town that that be approved.
I've heard Mr. O'Rourke, the chair of the school building committee, mention that, should it go forward, they'll need an owner's project manager to proceed with the planning, and if it doesn't, then they'll need one to consultants to help look for other alternatives.
Yes.
So either way, the committee believes they'll need some funds.
Yes.
Understood. That also seems pragmatic. Blue Hills Reservation, now we're back to things that are normal course of business, but it looks like we've had an increase in enrollment and so some fees that follow.
Right.
Is this the same amount recommended by the select board? Pardon me, as I had the select, yes, it is by the select board.
Right. This is essentially tuition, if you will, to Blue Hills Regional Technical School. So they know what that number is, and they presented it to us, and we recommend that the town approve.
Very good. Consolidated facilities, again, went up a small amount, but this is the team that manages all of our buildings. Did this also get accepted by the warrant committee as recommended by the select board?
Yes.
Okay, anything controversial about it? It's got some lengthy comments in it. But,
No, not controversial. No.
okay, just explanatory. Then.
Right.
Okay, very good. 36, we're at interest and debt.
Right. Again, these numbers are the paying to interest and maturing debt. These are numbers that it's not a controversial number. Is that the payments that the town has to pay on its debt it's what it is, and so that we've asked that we be authorized to make those payments that we're basically obligated to make.
Okay. And then it looks like the fire station building project is coming online now in '24 because we've authorized some funds. We've seen construction at the central fire station by Town Hall. It looks like now we're starting to pay some of that back.
Yes.
All right, very good. 37, roadways, we have something called rescinded funds. Your comment's interesting. We don't see this every year, but what's the story?
Bear with me. Right. So what happens here is that we authorize for these funds to be allocated going forward, and we authorize these monies
Back in prior years.
back in prior years,
Right.
and in some cases it's not spent. And so what we're able to do is we're to rescind, so it's to rescind the balance of the authorization as no longer needed. So what we're doing here is we're rescinding the authorization of the unissued portions of those amounts.
So you can see the dates would have been the town meetings back in 2016 up to 2022. Looks like projects came in under budget, and so we can, in effect, reduce the amount we need to borrow because we're going to spend less money than anticipated.
Right.
That's good news.
It is good news. And then, and again, like, not controversial, because at some level, this is accounting.
Mm-hmm.
This is cleaning up the books. But because it does involve the expenditures of money, it needs to be dealt with by the town at town meeting.
Okay. Understood. Article 38, stabilization fund. This is our rainy day savings account, as it were. So this is probably one of those things, what to do with free cash. Capital, operating expense, or stabilization.
Right.
So it looks like we're putting, we did zero 2 years ago during COVID. We did $1 million last year, 500,000 this year. So we're still putting some in, but
Right.
different amounts.
And that's important. That 500,000 is important because that, again, there was a lot of conversation about the use of free cash. And if we look here at the balance of the stabilization funds, general is, let's call it 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Capital stabilization, let's call it 1 million. There's a road stabilization fund at $209,453.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something on the order of $6 million. It was in our conversations with the town administrator, we were persuaded that, and it wasn't a hard sell. We accepted that the $6 million in the stabilization funds was adequate, in that we would put the 500,000, $500,000 would go in from the fiscal year 24. Part of our conversation was, is there enough in the stabilization fund before we start putting it in these recurring positions?
Right. In the operating budget of the town.
In the operating budget of the town. And so it was the warrant committee's conclusion that this 500,000 to go into the stabilization fund was sufficient.
Understood. 39, we see this every year, and as I recall, it refers to the unfunded liability for our retirees. It looks like we're paying some money to help close that gap. Did I
Yes.
summarize that correctly?
Yes.
And is this the amount recommended by the select board, the $100,000?
Yes.
And it looks like it came from free cash.
Yes.
Okay, got it. 40, reserve fund. What is the difference between the reserve fund, I guess, and the stabilization fund?
An accountant will probably take great umbrage at what I'm about to say, but it's just been explained to me that the reserve fund is sort of treated more as the rainy day fund.
So you're budgeting $250,000 to be used for something to be determined down the road in 24.
Right.
But I think what has to happen is the warrant committee has to authorize the expenditure of that towards some future item
Yes.
later on. So if the town comes to you and said, hey, we need the 250 for something or whatever, they'd come to you and you'd release it or not, depending on the discussion.
Yes.
Understood. Okay. 41, which is a new revolving fund. So this is establishing a revolving fund. We don't see this every year. What's the explanation?
Right. So this is the town. Milton Department of Public Works. There's a lot of trench work that's done in town by way of gas lines, water lines, and there's a way for which the Department of Public Works can, so they take a lot of money, they take money in for permitting, and they take these fees in. And I'm not going to do a great job of this, but if they create a revolving fund, that's a place that they can put those monies into to make it more easily accessible to them, to expend money that they need to expend. And so, again, I'm not an accountant, but basically by authorizing them to create this revolving fund, it would just streamline for them the ability to be able to have access to the money for things that they need to do.
Got it. So they've established an account. So when they receive these fees for this, the trench work, and when we go to the next article on 42, we'll see lots of other revolving funds that already exist.
Right.
So it's an accounting creation so we can capture these fees and then not get it lost in the general revenue of the town.
Right, and also because I think it's helpful because, again, like we're just saying before, what happens like where to get money out of the rainy day fund, they have to request permission, and is that if it's put into the revolving fund, it just makes it just streamlines the process if we're doing things that they would do anyway.
And then you're authorizing the DPW to then spend up to $250,000 of those if they collect up to that.
Right.
Beyond that, they'd have to come back for some additional permission, I imagine.
Right.
Okay. Then 42, that's the rundown of the anticipated size of all the other revolving funds we already have. And this one we do see every year. Anything unusual this year about revolving funds? So accept it as submitted. Very good.
Right.
Number 43, the PEG Access Fund. So this is, again, establishing a new fund. The story here.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to.
It's been a few months.
Right. I mean, again, there's different type. A lot of these funds are creations of law that say that we can establish a fund pursuant. So, like for here, is that we're authorizing to change the mechanism the town uses from a special revenue fund under MGL 4453 F3/4 to an enterprise fund. So we're changing it from a special revenue fund to an enterprise fund to allow the town to appropriate revenues received as well as revenues anticipated in the fiscal year. Currently, the town may only appropriate funds available on the date of vote. The change would have no. So effectively, what it's doing is that we're changing it from one type of fund to another type of fund. And it's my recollection of this that is it's basically an accounting measure that would allow us to better manage our PEG account.
Understood. So we're complying with some state law that provides some flexibility. It sounds like the appropriations of the funds, but not necessarily the expenditures, because they'll still have to come to town meeting for expenditures,
Right.
as I see it. Okay. And then 44 it looks like one of those appropriations. So $500,000 from this new Access Enterprise, this fund, in order to go support things like we're on here today, Milton Cable Access.
Yes.
Milton Access TV, pardon me.
Right.
Okay. And then we have two more, 45 and 46. So 45 is easements. We see this every year. Anything unusual there? No, it's typical language that authorizes the town to continue to accept the easements. Okay.
Yes.
And 46, provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 200A. And this is, again,
Right.
sounds like it's some accounting compliance, perhaps.
Right. It is just again, there's a statute that allows the town for how they can handle uncashed checks.
So when we mail a vendor a check and they haven't cashed it, we had no way to go deal with it. Now we do?
Now we do.
Okay.
And it just allows them to be able to return unclaimed funds to the general fund of the town pursuant to the statute, as long as they have followed the rules.
Okay, so if Acme Inc. doesn't cash the check after a certain number of years or time, we post notice and they don't get back to us, we cancel the check and the money's returned back to the general fund.
Yes.
Good, okay. And that is a wrap. And then you've got some interesting tables at the back, which are typically here on full and part-time positions, personnel, the tax levy, some history, et cetera. So very good. Mr. Humphreys, thank you. So once again, our town meeting will be Monday, May 1st, 7:30 p.m. at the high school. I imagine it's going to go, I would bet, if I place money, 4 nights, I think. I've got a consent agenda that will be mailed out on hopefully Wednesday after our full town meeting slate has been elected on Tuesday, the 25th. If you could get there a few minutes early so we can hand out your electronic voting devices. And again, thank you to Dave Humphreys, Chair of the Warrant Committee. Thank you to the Warrant Committee for a lot of hard work this year. And again, I'm Bobby Hitch, your town moderator, and I will see you on Monday the 1st. Thanks very much.